Hi, everyone. I'm McKenna. I'm the owner of Murder by the Book in Houston, Texas, and I'm so excited to be joined by Michael Connelly and Alafair Burke tonight. These are two friends of mine that I've known for a lot of years, and I am just really excited to have them both in conversation because I know they too are friends, and this should be a really fun event. Michael Connelly is the author of 34 previous novels, including the New York Times bestsellers Fair Warning, The Night Fire, and Dark Sacred Night. His books, which include the Harry Bosch series, the Lincoln Lawyer series, and the Renée Ballard series, have sold more than 74 million copies worldwide. Connelly is a former newspaper reporter who has won numerous awards for his journalism and his novels. He is the executive producer of Bosch, starring Titus Welliver, and the creator and host of the podcast Murder Book. He spends his time in California and Florida, and he's here with us today to talk about the new Lincoln Lawyer book, The Law of Innocence, which we have signed copies available of. Alafair Burke is the Edgar-nominated New York Times bestselling author of 12 novels, including The Wife, The Ex, If You Were Here, Long Gone, and the Ellie Hatcher series. A former prosecutor, she's now a professor of criminal law and lives in Manhattan. She's also been co-authoring the Mary Higgins Clark series, and she has a brand new book out, Piece of My Heart, that we're going to give her a quick chance to talk about later. But for now, I'm going to go away, let them talk, and I will be back in a little bit. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, McKenna.
Thank you.
Hi, Mike.
Hey.
Nice to see you. So congratulations on another #1 New York Times bestselling novel. I was reminding you before we went live that my husband, now husband, Sean, and I happened to be with you in 2005 when you hit #1 on the New York Times. You got the news while we were sitting around after your book signing in Manhattan that night. Does it feel different now than it felt then in 2005?
No, I mean, it's always it's a pretty amazing thing. It's I don't know. It's not like keeping score or something, but there's something about it that, I treasure, and it's still a pretty wonderful thing. And when we get the news, and last night we got the news, my wife and I were together, Linda, and had a nice evening and toast.
A friend of mine was involved in the publishing of a book by Halsey, which is #2 on the list right behind you, and they were cursing your name, that Michael Connelly.
Yeah.
They wanted her to be #1. You deprived her of it.
I think my daughter was cursing me too. She I have a 23-year-old daughter, Alafair, you know her very well, and she's a big Halsey fan. So she was like, "What?" But I'm also like, "What? Shouldn't Halsey's book be nonfiction?"
It's poetry. So I was trying to figure out where, I guess, poetry is considered fiction. If poetry had its own list, my guess is she would be #1 for months.
But it's poems about her life, I think. So it seems like it should be nonfiction. But okay, whatever.
Right. Well, then she would have had to wrangle with your other friend, Matthew McConaughey, right?
Yeah. Doing pretty well.
See, between the two of you, she was up against it. So I'm going to do something weird. I'm going to start by, nobody likes to read from their own books, but I'm going to read from your book, because this is the very first page. So people were begging no spoilers. There will be no spoilers, except I'm going to read from the first page because as a criminal law geek, like, I already knew I was going to love this book. I always love all your books, especially the Mickey Howard books. But when I got to this page, I was like, oh, this is going to be really good. I'm going to truncate it. You'll see that there's a pun intended there. I'm just going to read a little bit of the beginning and a little bit of the end of the page and then ask you something about it. So a murder case is like a tree, a tall tree, an oak tree. It has been carefully planted and cared for by the state. The tree's branches eventually grow and spread wide in splendor. They provide deep shade for those who seek true justice. The branches spring from a thick and sturdy trunk. Direct evidence, circumstantial evidence, forensic science, motive, and opportunity. The tree must stand strong against the winds that challenge it. And that's where I come in. I'm the man with the axe. My job is to cut the tree down to the ground and burn its wood to ashes. And like, I just got chills again, like reading it out loud. To me, as somebody who appreciates the difference between a prosecutor's job and a defense attorney's job, and I was on the prosecutor's side, not Mickey Haller's side, I always thought it like that's what defense attorneys do. That's more fun than what prosecutors do. Like we have the elements of the offense. We have, here's all the things and you check off the list. And the defense attorney just gets to come in and create chaos and poke a million holes at it. And to me, it shows that you really understand what it feels like to be a litigator, like the type of litigator Mickey Haller is. And that's the kind of stuff, like, I'm just surprised that, I shouldn't say I'm surprised you knew that. You know everything down to like what kind of pen this guy uses, because you're that seeped into the guy's job. But what have you done to, it seems like you have kind of learned how to breathe like a defense attorney. What has that journey been like since you wrote the first Lincoln Lawyer book?
Well, I mean, I've always been fascinated by legal dramas, and like many people, there was a time in my life where I thought maybe I'd go to law school and things like that. So I've always paid attention to that. Plus, To Kill a Mockingbird was a significant book in my life. And, and it's about a guy who, is willing to sacrifice a lot about himself and what's close to him to do the right thing. And those are, I don't know, that's not usually attributed to defense attorneys. But I just kind of have always been fascinated by the underdog quality or nature of doing the defense work, because you go against the, people like you and the power and might of the state. And so it's always a classic underdog story. And, so that's what that attracts me to it. And I got the idea for Mickey Haller, the guy who works out in the backseat of his Lincoln, way back in 2000. I went to a baseball game and met a guy who was wearing a shirt and tie at a Dodgers game because he was playing hooky from his job. And we talked, and turned out he was a lawyer, and he worked out of his car. Not because he was a desperate lawyer or not making money. He said it's the best way to do it because at that time, everything's been kind of cut back, but at that time there's 40 courthouses in LA, and he wanted to be able to move between them and be able to keep working and so forth. So that was the idea, but I didn't write The Lincoln Lawyer for about 5 more years, and I spent a lot of those years, when I could, kind of piecemeal, hanging around with a couple of lawyers, criminal defense lawyers. It's kind of like the fly on the wall. And that's really, even though that ended in like 2005 and I wrote the first book and it came out in 2006, those immersion years of watching these guys work, sometimes they would let me even sit in the corner of the office when they would talk to a client who just came in, and it would be about the nitty gritty, like, how are you going to pay me? This is what it's going to cost. Things that went way beyond the ideas of law and so forth. And it was all fascinating to me. And, it still informs a lot of what I do. I still talk to those guys. I give them first drafts to say, what do I got wrong? What can I make better? And so that really kind of informs a lot of my work. A lot of it's not, it's not creative genius. It's journalism. It's reporting and asking questions and then putting it into the story and hopefully getting things close to being right. I know there's stuff that I know it's risky business when you're not a lawyer and you're writing legal thrillers, because thanks to the internet, lawyers can chase you down and tell you what you got wrong. And I've already got you about this book, little things that don't really matter, but they seem to matter a lot to the lawyers who are sending.
They're probably wrong, because I didn't see anything. Let me answer those. I'll answer those emails for you. So the title, do you struggle with titles, or do titles just kind of come to you? I always struggle with them.
Well, sometimes I have it right off the bat, and I love it, and I stick with it. Sometimes I've written a whole book without a title, and then it gets into the publishing house, and it's by committee. This one wasn't an easy one. We had a few different ramifications in this one. Again, we don't want to do spoilers, but in the first chapter, Mickey's arrested for murder, and he's put in a jail, which is a real jail in downtown LA called Twin Towers. And that was actually the title I turned the book in with. And then that created a debate about the Twin Towers in New York and things like that. So Law of Innocence is actually a secondary title.
I don't think it's a spoiler. Can you talk about what the law of innocence is and how it applies to Mickey in this book, or is that a spoiler?
Yeah, I mean, it's you kind of hit on it earlier that Mickey's charged with this crime. So the book's about him. Most people go into this book, they're not going to go like, did he do it? Did he not do it? That's not where the drama is. I think everyone knows a writer's not going to have his protagonist really be guilty. So that's not the question. It's a first person story. He says, I didn't do this. And I think you're obligated as a reader to believe him. The drama is how's he going to get out of this jam? And especially because he's in jail, how's he going to strategize and be able to create a credible defense when he has this big obstacle, and that is that he's not free to move around and work his case. And the other part is that he's somewhat of a public figure. In the books, I play that there was a movie and that he was portrayed by Matthew McConaughey, and he's a guy who has pictures on bus benches on the sides of buses as he advertises. And so the courts can just render a verdict of guilty or not guilty, but he needs a verdict in the public, in the court of public opinion, and he needs to be exonerated, and he needs to be found innocent. And so the law of innocence is a kind of a play on that if you're not guilty, that means there's somebody guilty that's out there. And while no defense attorney has to prove who did it, they just have to, prove that their client didn't do it. Mickey feels the extra obligation of solving the case to see, partially because he wants to know who framed him, obviously, but he's also trying to win exoneration in the eyes of the public.
Yeah, so you mentioned your books are all very meta, right? Like they're the crossovers. I'm sure if we plotted it out on the wall, it would look like a serial killer's crazy wall with a bunch of string going from dot to dot. But I'm right, am I not? I think all of your books, without exception, right? Don't they all take place in the same universe? Like these people all live in the same present. Yeah. So I try to make a list of everybody. So you've got the Bosch series, the Holler series, Renée Ballard, Jack McAvoy, right? And then you've got Rachel Walling, who kind of shows up, and all these people appear in each other's books, and Terry McKellar, and I guess Cassie Black even sort of appears in more than one book, right?
Yeah.
Did I get everybody? Your website sort of helped, but I was like, oh, I forgot about Cassie Black. I thought she only had one book, and then I remembered that there is like a little cameo, a little reference in a couple of other books. But how do you keep that all? Well, let me back up. Was that intentional? Like, at what point did these worlds start to merge? Like when you wrote your first non-Bosch book, did you know it exists in the same universe as the Bosch books, or did you put it together after the fact?
No, I like writing very contemporary books. So every book I write is set in the year it's published. And I guess the through line is Los Angeles. Even a book like The Poet, which starts in Colorado, ends in Los Angeles. So the connection is LA, and they're contemporary. So I think it's understood that they're all moving across the same plane of time. And so after a while, at some point, I remember, I think it was my 10th book, A Darkness More Than Night, where Bosch encounters Michaela. And, and that was the first time I kind of crossed characters, and then it became contagious. And so now, there's a lot of crossing of characters and stories and things like that. And, so that it's just fun to do. I mean, I write the way I read. I love coming across that stuff when I'm reading it. In a way, it's a reward if you've been staying with a writer for a long time and somebody crops up from a previous book. It's fun. It's like, oh, I know who that is.
Yeah, it's like a little Easter egg.
Yeah, so that's what I put in my books.
So this is a hard question to ask, and it's probably harder to answer, but when I assume you think of your characters all the time, right? Like they kind of live in your head. Do you tend to think of them one at a time, given what book you're currently writing, or are they all there all the time? Like,
yes, a lot of voices in my head. No, I mean,
does that make sense? Like, do you think of, is Harry there more than other people? Does it depend on what you're writing at the time, or are you constantly just like, are they like a family that lives in your head?
I think they're like a family, but I kind of don't think they live in my head. It's a very controlled environment, you know. You always get that question, and sometimes you hear writers say, "Oh, that character really surprised me," and it's like, I don't get that, because you write every word of the book, so I don't know where the surprises are. I don't think I have like the voices of these people in my head. What happens is I come up with an idea and I decide which character should carry it. That happens a lot. Sometimes though, I just miss a voice. Like Mickey Haller has appeared in a few Bosch books in the last few years, but his own books, he's first person, and I think he has a distinctive voice, and I like his voice. And so this is the first real Haller book, I think, in 7 years, and I really kind of wrote it in large part because I just missed his voice, because when I put him into a Bosch novel, it's not his voice. It's
right.
You see him through Bosch's eyes.
Right. You mentioned this before, that your books also take place in real time, and like, I know how committed you are to that. Like, you don't cheat. Like, so reading this book now and seeing and I know when it was finished, you've got references in there to, a time, I guess it would have been winter time of this year, of articles of impeachment going to the Senate, and Bosch hearing news reports of a mysterious virus on the other side of the world. Was that happening as you, I know the timing, but when do you put that stuff in? And like, given your commitment to make things timely, like, what's the latest you've had to like run to the printer and say halt the presses, something's changed?
Well, I'm way back in 2001. I asked for my book back. I turned in a book right before 9/11, and and even though it's about Harry Bosch in L.A., how could you? I don't know. I had a hard time thinking, like, why would I publish a book that doesn't reference that? So I asked for my book back, and I asked for I think I wanted a month to kind of filter in the effect of that thing, of that catastrophic event on a detective and the FBI and their newfound powers and so forth. And so that was the only time I've ever said, "Hey, give me that book back." But what happened with this book, I usually start books in November and turn them in right at the beginning of June. And I set them in the year that they come out. So I was writing this book, and I had set it in basically March, April. And I'm writing, and then when we get to March, April, and I'm like maybe more than about 60% through the book, the pandemic hits in its full force, and the courthouses in Los Angeles were closed. So I was writing about a courtroom drama taking place in March and April, and it was totally, not real because those courthouses were closed. So it kind of paralyzed me for a little bit. I took about 2 to 3 weeks of no writing, thinking, what do I do about this? And watching the news and like everybody. So then I decided just to back the story up, retool it. And essentially it starts, I think, on October 30th or something, but essentially it's set in January and February. And that gave me the ability to reflect. I didn't want to be heavy-handed about it, but there's a couple of references to this coming plague, more or less, and there's references to Kobe Bryant dying and impeachment and things like that, so that the story is very much cemented in this year and in the early part of this year. And that's that. I guess that's the reporter in me. I just like doing that. Maybe it dates the book so that they're perishable. Maybe it won't matter. About all this stuff in 4 or 5 years, but it helps me in the writing period to really be plugged into what's going on. in the world. And I'm sorry for the long answer, but there's one other thing.
No, I'm fascinated by it.
Well,
I'm way too lazy to do that. I marvel at it. Like, I know that like you are so committed to that, and I marvel at it. I don't even know how you do it.
Well, committed. I mean, it sounds like it's a big thing. It's just like I like, being a former reporter. I just like getting some of that in there. But the added part I was going to say was there was like a twinning of things. Like Mickey Haller is charged with a crime. Murder that can change his life, and so the stakes are so high for him, and he's heading towards this trial that is a huge crisis, and at the same time the whole world is heading towards this huge crisis. So I just thought they kind of fed off of each other, and maybe maybe it doesn't work, or maybe it's not noticed.
No, it does. Yeah,
in my mind I was thinking that. Yeah,
no, it does. It does work. Can we talk about TV projects? Because I know you have many. So what's the status? So I know you're involved with, you're filming what is supposed to be the last season of Amazon's Bosch, right? How is the filming different now with, we won't talk about COVID all night, but it's hard not to have it come up. I mean, so how is filming different, or is it?
Oh, it's definitely different. There's a lot of safety protocols and so forth. And it's a TV show that very much celebrates or is embedded in the real Los Angeles. So we're not a show that spends a lot of time on stages. It takes us about 8 days to film an episode, and we're usually out in the city for 6 of those. And that's become more difficult because lots of places are closed. Lots of places have concerns about like coming in and filming and so forth. So that shifted that dynamic to probably 4 days on stage and 4 days in the city.
I was wondering about that. I always love all the restaurant scenes and stuff like that. Like, is that gone?
No, not necessarily, because a lot of those restaurants are hurting. And if you could come to them and say, can we act like you're open and film a scene? And of course we pay them. That's worked out. So we've filmed already in a couple of restaurants that are not open. But our story that we're telling is pre-COVID, and it was already written and mapped out before the pandemic happened. So it's kind of like my book. There's references to this pandemic coming, and there was a big thing in Los Angeles. I think it was January 24th that the Centers for Disease Control started meeting flights from Wuhan and checking people for fevers and things like that. And that was a news story in LA. And so that's in the book that we're talking about. It's also in our TV show because it's set around the same time. But right now we've just went through a 2-week shutdown because one of our guest actors had a positive test. So, all this is controlled by an organization called Film LA. And they set the protocols and so forth. And if you get a positive on an actor or someone who's working with everybody, you just got to shut down for 14 days. And we did that. We go back into production actually tomorrow. And hopefully that will be our one scare. And that actor's okay. It was asymptomatic, but multiple tests that he was positive. So it's part of the business now.
Yeah, right. You probably know this. Do you know there's a petition? People have started a petition, like that they need more Bosch. Like that's got to feel kind of bittersweet a little bit, right?
That's been fantastic and very helpful, and it works in our favor. I mean, we are filming the last season of Bosch, but we're lobbying to continue, and the pandemic has created a crisis in content because the whole entertainment industry was shut down, and so we're working on that. I
oh wow, I didn't realize that. I thought, I was like, I didn't think things like that mattered, but I guess.
Well, hopefully it will, and the groups that are petitioning and saying more Bosch, it's very helpful, and so anyway, we'll see, but hopefully there'll be more Bosch to come.
And then are you allowed to talk about any of the other stuff? Is it?
Well, I mean, talking about COVID, we were 3 days away from starting to film a TV show for CBS on the Lincoln Lawyer, and that got shut down like everything. And then a few weeks later, CBS decided, to cut their losses, and they killed the whole show. So it came back to me, and we were ready to go. We've been looking for another home for the show, and I think we're going to find that. And I have to keep some stuff top secret, but hopefully in the next, definitely before the end of the year, I think I'll know where we're going to be able to find a home for Lincoln Lawyer. And I'm pretty confident it'll be a TV show somewhere next year.
So, but you've had, it was adapted first as a film, of course, with Matthew McConaughey. So what do these adaptations, so once Titus Welliver becomes a really credible Bosch, and once Matt McConaughey is a really persuasive Holler, does that start to morph into your understanding of those characters? Do they become the same iteration of the character, or do you think of them as sort of separate? The way you envision Bosch is still Bosch, and then Titus is Bosch's TV Bosch, or do they merge?
There's a little bit of merger, but what's interesting is that even though I think my books are pretty visual, they're not in the writing process. So what's invaded, and invaded sounds like a bad word, but I can't think of a better one, is their voice. I definitely hear Titus's voice when I'm writing a Bosch book, and I hear McConaughey's voice when I'm writing a Lincoln Lawyer. I have to hold back from writing all right. And it's weird. It's just the voice. It's not the visual image of either actor. I have visual images of the actors, of the characters in my head, and those have stuck, but their voices become those guys.
Yeah, as a reader, I've noticed that. Particularly, Titus. I don't usually listen to audiobooks. I don't like them as much as reading books. But one of the first book that he read, was that 3 books ago? I think so. But he's been reading your Bosch books. But I was curious about it, and he's really good at it. I don't know that all actors are good at being audiobook readers, but it felt really natural to hear him narrating the books.
Yeah, I think he's excellent. He's really excellent at it.
Yeah. So you've got all these jobs. You write 4 different series. You create all these TV shows, and then McKenna mentioned that you're doing a second season, or it's on now, right? The second season of your murder book podcast. Where does that fit in? Do you think of it as all part of the work, or do you think of it as a passion project? Is it more of your journalism? Is it you can tell I'm really into categorizing things. Is that its own lane, or is it part of the same world?
Well, while I answer this, I just want to draw your attention that your fire is about to go out. So if you want to go stoke the fireplace while I answer, we'll do that.
Then everyone will realize that not only am I wearing your merch as a t-shirt, I'm wearing sweatpants and no shoes. So we're not going to do that.
That's the Zooming way. God, now I can't even remember. The podcast. It's part passion project for sure. But also it's journalism, and it's weird. For 20 years, I didn't miss being a journalist. I think there is journalism in my books, even though they're fiction, and that was enough for me. But I don't know. Just in recent years, I felt like telling some true stories, and I'm plugged in with some detectives who have done some pretty amazing work and involved in some significant cases, and I just wanted to give voice to what they do, because they inspire me in terms of Harry Bosch and and Renée Ballard and other characters. So, why not tell stories through their voices? And so that's what I've been trying to do with the podcast. And but yeah, at the end of the day, that is a passion project. It doesn't take a whole lot of time. It's very DIY. I actually record my stuff I turned a little storage room in my garage, and I padded the walls and so forth, and made it a little sound stage so I can record my part of it, and that's made it a lot simpler.
Well, and you're doing that with police officers who have kind of been advisors to you for years, right?
Yeah. No, I mean these people. It's kind of strange. Like this season of the podcast is about Sam Little, who the FBI says is the most prolific serial killer of in history in the United States. He's credited with 93 murders, and he was caught by Mitzi Roberts. He's the same detective who inspired Renee Ballard.
Yeah.
So wow, what a coincidence that this person who inspired me also caught probably the most villainous killer that we know of. And it's a fascinating case that really relied on her relentlessness and not giving up and trying to write something that's pretty terrible, that this guy for 4 decades killed many people with seeming impunity until he came across her radar, and then she put an end to it.
That's pretty cool though, that you take like these people who were kind of just helping you out as like, we all have the experts that we call in the so-called Rolodex. It's all electronic now, but
Yeah.
and you kind of helped them become their own storytellers, right? Did you invite them? Was that your idea? Or, I mean, where did that come from? I mean, I know it's always hard to say where an idea comes from, but.
Well, I mean, it came from like wanting to kind of even it out because, I was feeling guiltier and guiltier because these people are great storytellers. They have very unique voices. And I was kind of hoarding it. I was like I was taking their stories and turning it into fiction, but they actually, face these real killers and these real risks. And, and I just think they should be credited for that. And, the first season was about a case where the detective was on the case for over 30 years and stuck with it. And, so to me, there's some heroic stuff in there. And I reached the point where like, I just can't keep taking their stuff and turning it into Harry Bosch and Renee Ballard. I should tell their stories as well.
I'm just laughing because Franny back here. Franny's looking at me like, lady, make the fire go.
Yeah, it's getting cold.
She's like, make it go. It was interesting that you said it was kind of nice to go back to your journalism roots because I don't want to overstate the causal link, but didn't you kind of go into journalism with an eye towards like it was a means to an end of being a novelist?
Yeah, I would just say a hopeful means to an end. It's actually my father's idea when I told him I wanted to write crime novels. I was 19 years old. I had that idea. And he suggested going into journalism and then ask for the cop beat or the crime beat or the court beat so you could, have some experience in that world. And, and then hopefully you get in a position to take your shot at writing a novel, and it kind of worked out. And what about you? Was being a prosecutor a means to an end, or is this?
No, it was the complete opposite. You were the one who wanted to be a novelist and your dad told you to be practical. I was the one who had a dad who told me I should be a novelist. I was a natural born talent. And I was like, Dad, you're crazy. I'm going to do something that's the complete opposite. I'm going to be a lawyer. But I thought when I went to law school, I was going to be an entertainment lawyer. I think I had watched The Player too many times. And I thought like that would be really cool to be like one of the lawyers putting the deals together and get to go to the Oscars without having any actual talent as an actor. But once I went to law school, I was really interested in the criminal side of things. And so I decided to become a prosecutor. And once I was at the prosecutor's office, I just kept seeing stories. Like I kept seeing a fictionalized version of that world. And so I didn't want my dad to know at all, like, because I didn't want to prove him right. Like I didn't tell him I was writing a book till it was done.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have heard the end of it.
I think the first time I met you, I was doing a book signing in Portland and you came and you were a prosecutor and you didn't say anything about like, someday I'd like to write a book.
No.
Your
I didn't tell. I was like, mum's the word. Like I started it like, God dang it, he was right. But yeah. So I'm going to play what if, and if you said, luckily it worked out, and it worked out for you pretty quickly. I mean, nobody, it's not like nobody immediately like has a movie star life after one book, but you know, you got nominated. You won, right? For best first novel.
Yeah.
Edgar Award. Yeah. So that's usually a sign that you've got something going on that's right. And then the poet blew up. And so, you know, you've had a really successful career. What if it hadn't worked out? Like how long would you have stuck at it? Like if your print runs had dwindled, like if everything had been sad instead, like, would you be one of those people who just kept doing it and doing it and doing it? Or I mean, if you imagine that, or is that just too hard to imagine?
Well, no, I've imagined it. By the way, are your dogs allowed on the couch? I just want to point that out.
They are now. 2020,
okay.
There are no rules, baby.
Okay. No, I mean, I have imagined that. And, you know, and it's hard, you know, I know people won't believe it, but I think the writing is so fulfilling that I would keep doing it, you know, or if I wrote books and no one read them, but someone wanted to publish them, but I needed a job to sustain myself, I would have stayed as a reporter and done this at night. You know, I did it for a long time. You know, I wrote 2 books over about a 6-year period that I've never sent out. You know, they were kind of the learning experiences, but I had a great time writing them. And it's hard. I know people probably find it hard to believe when I say that, but I enjoyed being an unpublished writer. And I was an unpublished writer for more than 10 years as I worked at this and got better at it. And I, you know, maybe it's just nostalgia or whatever, but I remember those times where I made a deal with my wife that I could let me write 4 nights a week and 1 weekend day. And, you know, hopefully someday I'll get published. And
wow.
And she was all for it, and I did it, and I always enjoyed it. And so your question is, you know, it's very existential. What would I have done if, you know, I'm 30 years since those years. You know, I don't know, but there is a lot of fulfillment from writing stories, and most, even now today, my fulfillment will come on the day where I write a good piece of dialogue or I move the story a step forward, and I really enjoy it. And then I come out and have dinner, and my wife can tell I've had a good day of writing. It's just the way it is.
That's great.
But you know, I have gotten very lucky, and you know, I wouldn't trade that luck for anything. But if it hadn't happened, I still might be doing this for myself.
And do you think you would have stayed in the reporting business, or do you think you would have done something different to pay the bills? Like what kind of journalist would you have been?
Is right, because it's not you don't make a lot of money in it, but it's a really fascinating job. I remember at one point in my journalism career, there was a time where I was IBM came calling to see if I'd be interested in working in PR for IBM. So I flew up to New York and went through the whole interview process. And the whole time I'm thinking, like, God, do I really want to do this? And,
I cannot see you doing that.
Well, thankfully they must have seen I was not good at PR, because they never offered me the job. So I never had to make that decision. And I went back, at this time I'm living in Florida, and I went back and just kind of rededicated myself to doing well in journalism, and I got into some pretty good stories that then got me the attention of the LA Times. Moved out to LA, and then I started writing a book that got published. So things happen for a reason, I guess.
I think we did the timing about right. If McKenna wants to help us take questions, also I saw Olga's here. Hi, Olga, my favorite rock climber from Portland.
Can you guys hear me? I'm unmuted. Everything's good?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So we do have a couple questions. Gerald was wondering, do you see the pandemic playing a more significant role in future books?
So what are you doing with your next book? You'll skip, you're going to hope it's over by the time?
No, I actually have well, you should answer this too, but I have a plan. I'm about to start writing my next book, and it's set in January of 2021. Or it starts then. It might go past January, but it starts on January 1st. And so obviously we'll still be knee deep in this pandemic, even though there's hopefully inoculations coming and all that. But so it's a Ballard book. Harry Bosch will probably show up in it, but it's a Renée Ballard book. And so I'm about to start doing research on how detectives are working now, beyond just the mask, how they deal with the public and things like that. So I think it's gonna be in my next book for sure.
Alafair, what are you working on? Is it going to be in yours?
I'm ignoring it for now. My pub date, because of various things that are going on, got pushed. So I pushed it till it won't come out till August of 2021, and it's set in summer. So in theory, I can just kind of ignore it and maybe it will have been over by then or something. But I think readers might be okay reading things and watching things and living in a world fictionally where this stuff doesn't happen. I don't have the same commitment Mike has to making the world that my books play out in as our exact world. I mean, I respect, that's why I marvel at your commitment to it, because I kind of like it that I can just, Ellie's world is just kind of a different world, even though it's a realistic world. It's not like sci-fi or something, but.
So it's an Ellie Hatcher book?
She's in it, yeah. It's kind of a weird hybrid book.
Cool.
So,
but
I'm doing what you do, where everybody crosses over. So.
No, but I mean, I did think about that. I mean, this is so oppressive, what we've been through.
Yeah, I'm kind of sick of thinking of it.
Do people actually want it in their entertainment? People are reading our books, crime novels and so forth. And, McKenna can answer this more than us, but I think they're looking for escapes. Yeah. So here I come along. Yeah. I put it in a book. I realize that might be off-putting to people. Maybe they don't want to read about that. Maybe they don't want something that is so realistic that we're including this thing I'm trying to escape from, and here it is in this book. So it is a question, and both sides I think are pretty valid. What you decide. Yeah.
Well, I think it's I wrote a short story. I think we both wrote short stories for the next MWA Mystery Writers of America anthology. And I wrote mine at the last minute as the deadline was approaching, when I was locked in the house. But it's about someone locked in the house and kind of the weird places your mind goes when you're locked in the house by yourself for a really long time. And so it was actually about that. But it seems to me, if it's not about that, I think, Mike, you're doing something that it's on the page. It references the fact that it's going on, but I don't know that it makes sense for us as storytellers to jump through ridiculous hoops to tell a story that was created separate and apart from a COVID shutdown and then try to tell it through that lens, right? I think people are perfect. And plus, as I watch TV shows and it shows people in these beautiful, can you tell I've really missed restaurants? When it shows the people going into a restaurant and sitting in a crowd and I'm oh man, I kind of like watching people do that. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, one of my guilty pleasures is watching a comedy show called Superstore, and they just started their new season and they're all wearing masks and stuff. And I have to admit, I was kind of disappointed. It's that's real life.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
I will say though, while the desire for escape is real, and I too am just watching bubbly escapist shows and reading escape, I think that the tone of your books, Mike, has always been so realistic, and you've been so true intentionally to what's going on. I think your readers would be surprised if it wasn't in there. I think it would be a matter of the expectation is that you would be addressing it, just because that's kind of how your books have always read. Whereas Alafair's books are, psychological suspense, escapes, beach reads. She doesn't need to be dealing with COVID. So it's a perfect, rationale for both of your standpoints. I know several people have, bumped things up a month or two to avoid it, and just had their same book ready and realized that their timeline wasn't going to work, and so they just did minor tweaks. But I don't know how many books we're going to see that actually have it. It's funny, speaking of shows, This Is Us came out, and I guess they're dealing with COVID. I haven't watched the new season, but I belong to some internet group that deals with pop culture, and half the people were so excited that they were dealing with COVID, and the other half were so upset. So I guess, you're never gonna win. Okay, so we have some more questions. We have, will The Law of Innocence be the next Lincoln Lawyer movie?
No, I don't think so. I think I'm working towards getting a TV show going based on Mickey Haller, and it's already in process, and we're going down this road. And this new book is not even out there in Hollywood, so maybe we'll get to this story at some point, but it won't be the next thing up.
Fair enough. And then Carolyn was wondering, was it strange to change the setting from Vietnam to Iraq for Bosch TV?
Strange? No, I mean, I think we kind of had to do it. I mean, it's funny, so much in Hollywood is about money. I've been very lucky that I've been able to write across now, I think, 3 decades. And, we wanted to cast someone that hopefully we could get a 6 or 7 year run, which we ended up having. But so we had to look at someone who is in their 40s or early 50s, and that would preclude them from having been in the Vietnam War. So we had to retool all of that. And, we wanted to give them an experience like with tunnels, with war and things like that. So to some extent, we kept a lot of that kind of stuff, but we had to change the time frames and make the Bosch in the show, younger, and so therefore post Vietnam.
And then Carrie was wondering, and I would like to know this too, is Harry Bosch's house based on the Stahl house in LA, and or how did you come up with its look?
Are you talking? I don't know whether they're talking about the TV show or not, but the house in the TV show is not the house he lives in the books. It's much more of a fantastic view. And I don't know if people remember the movie from the 90s called Heat, but in Heat, Robert De Niro lives in the house that we use in the Bosch, because we have the same producer. The guy who produced Heat is one of our producers. He kept his Rolodex, a real Rolodex, and called the guy who owned that house up and said, "You want to rent it out again?" And he did. So that's how things work in Hollywood. In the books, Harry actually lives on the other side of the mountains, has a northern view. The view in the TV show is a southern view of the city. And it's a little different. It's not as nice as what we have on the TV show. And I don't know what the Stahl house is. I don't know what that means.
Let's see. So Olga actually has a question for both of you. What other than writing makes you happy when you spend time doing it?
Alafair, you can handle that. It's your friend.
You probably met Olga. She's a regular at Powell's Books events in Portland. Well, it's such a superficial thing, but I keep saying it. The thing that I've really missed is I miss going to you guys both know. Is she going to be honest and say what she really likes to do? I like to go to a nice restaurant. I like to sit at the bar. I like to know the bartender's name behind the bar. I like for him to know me back. Oh, Mike, you have a line in the book that's something like, someone told me once that your favorite restaurant is the place where they know you. I'm like, was I that person? Because I definitely feel that way. Like, I miss that. And my friends are like, unemployed now. The people who work in the restaurant business are very underemployed. So that's something that genuinely makes me happy. And then being on a beach genuinely makes me happy. I think I was born to live on a beach. Mike, what are some of your favorite things?
Very closely aligned, being with friends. Alafair and I have done a lot of stuff with our spouses and other friends, and now we're looking at each other on screens. It's it's difficult, but when I'm not writing, I do like travel, and I like being in the sight of water. So I guess that puts me in the beach category. Water is very restorative to me, and one of the things I love. I don't know, like to golf. I'm a bad golfer, but I would like to get better at it. Things like that.
So while those of you watching come up with a few more questions, I'm going to give Alafair a chance to talk about her books. We're always so appreciative of people who come in and guest interview, especially as well done as Alafair just did. So Alafair, you want to tell us a little bit about your brand new release, and then maybe also about some of the books you write on your own. Also, Jane has a question for you. How do you balance being a law school professor and writing?
Well, I stopped trying to balance it a few years ago, at least just the same degree. So I now only teach in the fall, and I teach classes that I really love. I like to teach 1L, so I teach criminal law, and then I teach a class about adjudication. So it's basically a seminar where everybody there is either going to be a prosecutor or a defense attorney. And we talk about all of the discretionary choices that get made while you're trying a case, from the bail to jail, as they call it. So it's stuff I really love to teach, and it's only 4 months out of the year. So that frees me up to do full-time writing for the other 8 months. So I think that was a question, right? How do I balance it? So I think I've struck about the right balance now. When I was teaching full-time and doing academic writing on top of it, and writing a book a year, it was a lot. And then when I started writing, kind of segues into the new book, I started co-authoring a series of books with Mary Higgins Clark, I guess, 7 years ago. That's kind of when I stepped back and I decided to go half-time so that I could, do more than one book a year. So it's juggling, but, I thought I wasn't like Mike, who always knew I wanted to be a writer. I thought I'm going to write my one book, just like my dad told me. I'm like, oh. I'm like, well, I'm just going to write one. Professor Burke will have a novel on her bookshelf so that she can be the cool professor who wrote a novel one time. And then I was surprised that they were like, this is a series, right? And I asked my agent, I'm like, is it supposed to be a series? He's like, I think they assume it's a series. And I was like, yes, I planned it that way. And I have so many more ideas. And, 17 years later and 19 books, if you count the Mary books, I still kind of can't believe I'm basically a full-time novelist at this point. But so Mary and I started writing that series together 6 books ago, and I think most people know she passed away at the end of January, and the book was fully contemplated by then. We had a manuscript going back and forth, but it wasn't completely done. I talked to the family about what her wishes were, and it was very clear that she wanted her readers to have that book. And so it was an odd feeling to kind of finish it without her. Plus during a shutdown, plus while, she was gone, and it was just sad. It's been a sad year for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. But what really helped me finish it is I just realized how much we had talked. It almost kind of, I won't say it finished itself, I had to put the words on the page, but every choice I made, with each new chapter, I felt like she was right there because we had already talked about it. I knew what she would want. So it was very satisfying for me to be able to do that, sort of in her memory, and to have her kids tell me it was what she wanted, and that she was really happy to be working on it all the way to the end. I know I'm making you cry. Sorry, making myself cry. But so to me, that book is very special because I know what went into it. So, and I know what she had wanted. So I'm very happy that it's there. And I know that her readers really appreciate it. So.
Yeah. And from a purely commercial standpoint, Alafair does have signed book plates that she sent us.
Did they get there?
Yes, they got here. So I checked at the store earlier and I said, do we have book plates? And they said no. And our mailman came on a second trip and said, these were still in the truck. And I was like, there are the book plates. So they are, and we have signed Murder by the book plates that Alafair has sent in case you're interested in getting a copy of.
Way to go, U.S. Postal Service, doing it right.
Yeah, coming through. All right, so we do have some more questions. Actually, I am going to ask a question of Mike because as musicians, both my husband and I are obsessed with the choice of the Bosch theme song, and I want to know how much your involvement was in that process.
That's kind of an interesting story because I have to credit Amazon, Amazon PR. They were putting together, I think it's called a sizzle reel, where they were taking, we were filming the show and all that, and they were taking highlights of it and kind of basically putting together a trailer, and they put that music on it, and I think the name of the group is called Caught a Ghost, and then they sent the trailer to us for our approval, and at the time we were like kind of at loggerheads. There's like 3 or 4 people who are like shot callers on the show. I'm just one of them, and we were at some people were saying we have to have a jazz theme because Harry Bosch is jazz, but other people were saying no, you need something that really is lively and draws people in, and we were like playing all kinds of music from Frank Morgan sax to Los Lobos and so forth, trying to find a theme song. And then we get this thing dropped on us that was a trailer put together by PR people. And as soon as we heard it, it was like, whoa, that
got a feeling.
Yeah.
I've got it in my head now.
Yeah.
We always go like this when it's on it.
Yeah. So then we sent that music to the people who do the theme, the whole package of the visuals and all that. That's a company that you kind of hire to do that. And so the mirror image and all that kind of stuff we had, and it had different music applied to it. And we said, hey, take this song and apply it to this. And then it was, when we saw that, it was like done deal. We knew that was it.
Yeah, we have gone down internet wormholes, both on researching who owned Harry Bosch's house on the TV show, as well as that theme song, to the point that we sing along to it every time and literally conduct, because it's got an irregular meter pattern. So like he and I had really long discussions about the actual composition of the song, but it is like the only TV intro that we don't hit skip intro. That song is a brilliant choice. It's great.
It's great. Interesting that it's what's wrong and sad is that there's usually no credit for a TV show theme song unless it's somebody who's like a titan of music. Then you have to give them credit. And I can't remember the name of the musician. Caught a Ghost is really one musician, but he calls his work Caught a Ghost. And his father started this campaign about give my son credit. And so eventually, I think it was not till the 3rd season, we give him credit, or we give Caught a Ghost credit at the end. And that's actually unusual. And here I am as a writer, and we're always concerned about credit. And I was thinking, like, why wouldn't we give this guy credit? And
really.
And the feedback was, well, it's just not done. Well, I said, well, we'll do it. I mean, people love this song. In 7 years of the show, we only got 1 Emmy nomination, and that was for our credit sequence. That's actually a classification, and we didn't win it, but it was because of that song. So it was like, give the guy credit.
That's weird.
Yeah.
I wonder why that. I mean, I always think of credits as like thanking the catering staff and stuff too, which I think is fine. Like thank everybody, but you would think that would get. It reminds me of the Sopranos opening song.
Got myself
same vibe.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's funny because as soon as you type like Bosch TV TH, then it's like theme song, and then just Reddit like lists and questions, and people are obsessed with it, which I'm sure you know. But the guy definitely gets credit if you type so much as Bosch TV theme. So people have it figured out. Okay, some more questions. So would either of you ever do a writer's workshop? Alafair, why don't we start with you?
As a student or as a...
I'm guessing as a teacher.
I was like, it shows how I think of myself.
I'm guessing as a teacher.
Yeah, after 17 books, you better do some workshop.
I was like, oh my God. That's where my head goes, like imposter syndrome. Someone buy that with some confidence. I've done a couple of things like Michael, I think you had introduced me to, I'm blanking out on his name, who runs a teaching situation in Florida. But I helped out with that one time. I don't think I know how to teach people law. I don't feel like I know how to teach writing, so I've tried to avoid being in that kind of situation. I've done it in kind of informal atmospheres where people just read like a very small part of their work in progress, and you can try to give them advice on it. And I was supposed to teach in Anne Hood's writing workshop that she does in Italy. You can probably imagine why I said yes to that gig, and I wound up having to cancel it. So I think the fact that my first reaction was I was like, as a student, probably means that I shouldn't be the teacher. I don't know. I mean, Mike, do you know how to teach writing? I just don't think I know how to do that.
Not really, but you somehow blanked out our Key West excursion where we were teaching writing. See, look at your face. You don't even remember this.
No, that wasn't teaching writing.
That was. It was the Key West workshop or something. No, it's kind of like what we do for international thriller writers and things like that. We
Yeah. I guess that's talking about. Well, we've done stuff. Yeah. We've done stuff for like international thriller writers. I think I've done MWA Craft Fest, but it's more like you talk about craft. I guess I was thinking of a workshop like where you do hands-on, like reading people's work and giving them feedback on the page. Like I'm not sure that I'm great at that.
I've done a few of those. They have writing, whatever they're called, in a lot of them in California, and I've done a few of those.
Right.
It's just hard to, I don't know. You run the risk of people being all mad at you, but it's hard to teach writing. I mean, it's like read books, and
yeah, and it's also very subjective. I mean, I can tell you if the commas are in the wrong place and if things are misspelled, but I mean that's very different than telling someone, whether they've got it, like whether the character is good, whether the story is intriguing. I mean, that's so subjective. I mean, McKenna, I've read some books where I'm just like, that is a piece of dog book.
I know, I'm thinking of one in particular right now.
and then it's like, all right, don't ask me.
Yeah.
Maybe like you should have workshopped this book before you published it or something.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well this one should be a quick question. What book or books will Bosch season 7 encompass?
It's pretty much based on The Burning Room. And then, we've created a lot of new stuff as we've gone along. And there was in season 6, there was a whole big story involving Jerry Edgar, which obviously is not from the books. And so we carry that forward. And then as far as the books go, it's The Burning Room. And that's pretty much it.
All right. So this is an interesting question. So Gerald, it's a long question, bear with me. I'm sure you guys would love to actually be present at bookstores to give these talks, but don't you find it easier and able to reach more people through virtual interviews? I know I would rarely get a chance to see my favorite authors in person. So I guess the question is like, how is this working out for you versus bookstores?
Yeah, Mike, you've been doing a ton of these. What do you think?
And I did a bunch in May as well. So, I mean, it's interesting. You can kind of cover the world. Like this week alone, I've done stuff in Spain, London, New Zealand, Australia. So if you were going to do in-person things, you pretty much got to pick one country. So you can kind of go around the world pretty quickly, but there is something missing from, in-person stuff. And, whenever I go to Murder by the Book, I always get a really good dinner afterwards. And I don't know if that's going to happen tonight. We'll see.
No, yeah. Not with us, at least.
Well, Gerald, I think, was the one who gave the question. I was noting that, and my friends who work on the publishing side of publishing were kind of joking around, like, you authors, like, you might not be getting so many frequent flyer miles anymore. Like, it might be the end of the book tour because these virtual things are working really well. But, I think for people who are in the room, and part of the reason why when I see Olga's name come up or I saw Aaron's name, it's like, oh, I know them because when you meet someone in person and you have a conversation at the signing table, like that sticks in a way that's a little harder to do online. You know, McKenna, you and I became friends at the bookstore. Mike and I, we met at a bookstore in Portland when I was a reader, getting my book signed. So I think that's harder to replicate. But yeah, the fact that I can be here, you know, in my sweatpants and barefoot and do an event with Mike, and people geographically all over the place can tune in, has definitely been the upside of these virtual events. But yeah, it would be, I was thinking that we would go to Tex-Mex if we were in Houston. You know, we'd go out and have some margaritas and enchiladas afterwards. But we missed that part of seeing librarians and seeing the booksellers in person. But it's definitely been easier to connect to readers in places where we wouldn't otherwise be able to go.
I will add, from a business perspective, despite my view not being asked, as a business owner, it is a little tricky, and publishers are trying to find a balance between ticketed events where there's a purchase requirement, like tonight's event. Obviously, Mike is a #1 bestseller and everyone's happy to buy his new book. They can't wait to read it. So it's easy to have a ticketed event for that. But for the people who might not be #1 bestsellers, it's hard to enforce a ticket and to potentially get big audiences and readers to tune in. So you run you're constantly balancing, and what we've found, having done literally over 100 of these now since April, there's a balance between accessibility and providing free content, as well as ticketing and perhaps limiting the number of people. And the other interesting thing is, regionally, we would have hundreds of people in store for Mike tonight, right? If we had him in store, and those would be people from Texas, people from Louisiana. But now anyone can watch from wherever, which is a plus side, but also, again, kind of reinventing the wheel, because the people who get the biggest turnout on their events are frequently the earliest events. So it's now, it's all new. We're all trying to figure it out. It's been fun to talk with people internationally that I wouldn't get to speak with. And of course, I've gotten to talk to Mike now twice and do this event with Mike and Alafair. Like, we haven't gotten to do that. So there's definitely some really cool things, but it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out when things start to resume normalcy.
Yeah, and I would encourage people, like, even if you buy stuff from McKenna's store, because you've been doing a good job. I called you at one point when I was just like in a very sad mood for reasons, you know, and I was just down in the dumps, and she called to check on me. I was asking her how the store was, and I was like, will you do me a favor? Will you just send me a huge box full of books? And she was like, what books do you want? And I'm like, I want you to just send me a box of books that will make me happy to open. She sent me like this big mystery box. So had some merch, I had some puzzles, some non-mystery books, and like she wrapped them all up, and I'm like, every day it was like a little present from McKenna. So they do a great job of hand picking books for you, and the shipping's super fast. So it's got to be frustrating for you when people show in to do these events that you guys plan, and then put in the comment like, I just got your book on Amazon.
I mean, look, it's a deal that we know we're embarking upon. Like, if we're not doing an event with a purchase requirement, then we know that that's going to happen. We know we're providing free content, and we've had so many people continue to support us and have new customers and compliment us. And, you know, we've had, for other events that aren't ticketed, a virtual tip jar, and people give money to us to keep those going. So I am in no way saying that people haven't been supportive. It's just, it's an interesting thing when, from a business model, you have to report sales figures after an event, and you say you had 80 people watch and then you sold 3 books. Like, that's not something that you want to report, because clearly those people watched the event. They might have loved the event, but they might be getting the book elsewhere. So again, it's still kind of in process, but the super, super cool thing is being able to do events like this.
Yes, and thank you for doing this. Yeah,
be able to do this. Okay, so for both authors and for me, what have you been reading recently? Mike, let's go with you.
In the mystery field, I mean, this is like a routine answer, I think, this year. The Blacktop Wasteland, I really like that book. I actually read it and then listened to it a second time. Just thought that was a great voice. Outside of mystery, my favorite film of all time is Chinatown, and a book came out about a year ago maybe less, called The Big Goodbye, which was about all the creative forces of, you know, screenwriters, directors, and so forth that had to kind of luckily cross paths and so forth to make that film. So it's weird to read a whole book about the making or how a film got made, and the film came out almost 50 years ago. But it was a really fascinating kind of social study of the world in the early 70s. So I really like that as well.
Alafair, how about you?
You're going to have to help me with titles because I'm terrible with book
what
titles.
I'm here for.
I will echo the Blacktop Wasteland was fabulous. Alyssa Cole's new book.
Yeah. Keep watching. John's gonna pop on the chat.
Yes.
He's gonna save me right here.
This is terrible. I can picture it. Like it looks like
it's a blue paperback with windows.
Yes. It's like yes. I'm terrible at plugging people's books and I can't, but her name's Alyssa Cole, and When No One Is Watching. Thank you, Erin. When No One Is Watching. It's really good. It's a kind of set in this gentrifying neighborhood of Brooklyn, and it felt very New York. It was really, really terrific. And then Lisa Unger's new book, which is something Train 23.
Confessions on the 455. Confessions.
I was going to say on the 23.
Am I just
Lisa?
Listen, we're in a pandemic. Our brains are occupied other ways. We're doing the best we can.
I never know that. I asked Mike to title Confessions on the 745. I was like, it's
45.
Confessions on the 745.
I was almost there.
I asked Mike if titles come easily to him. I can't, my own titles. I'm like, what did I wind up calling it? I have a hard time with titles. But anyway, I loved all those books. I read them really recently.
And I have been reading and tailoring my reading for the little amount of time that I have compared to normal, based on the people that I'm interviewing. So most recently I read the new Ian Rankin. I think it's his best book in a long time. It's a perfect place to dive in if you haven't actually read a John Rebus story before. It's really, really excellent. If you want something light and witty, Richard Osman's Thursday Murder Club is a classic golden age British mystery set at a retirement home, and he's a British TV quiz show host, and he is very funny, and that book is great. So for two completely different moods. So we'll try to rapid fire these last couple and then wrap up. So Michael, what is your writing process? Do you use an outline? Do you know how the story ends before you start writing, etc.?
Yeah, no outline, but I do know where I'm going. Light at the end of the tunnel, got to have that. And that's pretty much how I do it.
Alafair, do you outline?
I don't. I kind of know sort of in big pieces, big sections, sort of where I want to be at the quarter halfway mark, or, the quarters. And that's about it. Feel it out.
All right, so I don't exactly know what this is referencing, but I bet you guys will. So Olga has a question. On the Key West Literary Seminar, your alternate careers complement each other. Alafair architect, Michael carpenter. How well do you think you two would be able to work together constructing something concrete?
Wow, you've got a good memory.
I don't know. The architect's always the boss, so I might have a problem with Alafair directing all my carpentry.
You let me, boss. I feel like you would let me. I feel like you would be the person who actually knew how to make it look like that, but I would be like, make it. No, yeah, you would probably just wind up doing all the work, and I would sit around.
No, I'd say to her, the architect.
Tell jokes.
The architect works in theory and in sketches and stuff. This is the real world, Ms. Burke. I'm trying to take your designs and actually build them. It's sometimes it's pretty difficult.
I also have to say,
we gave opposite answers. I thought we would have worked really well together. I'm like, okay.
I think that's because your answer was not based in reality, Alafair. Having known you for a lot of years, I think that you are going to be the one in charge of the plan, no matter what. So yeah, whether you want to be or not, you're going to put that in charge cap on. All right, and the last question we're going to do is, which genre would be the most difficult for you to switch to if you were asked to write outside of your current one, and how would you approach it? So, Mike, you want to start with that one?
Well, the part about how would you approach it, that's a tough one. I mean, to me, I actually love science fiction movies. I've read a fair amount of science fiction books, but it's not my favorite genre of books. But that to me would be the most difficult, and I'm not even sure how I would approach it. But I'd probably just stay away from it.
How about you, Alafair?
I love like meet cute books, like where people fall in love, and like those kind of fun butterfly books. Like those are my happy place. Like last summer I was reading a lot of those. But I have to say, like, I'm so in the habit of, because I read so much crime fiction, of guessing what's going to happen and where things are going to go. When I read those books, I'm like, oh, what's he lying about? Who's gonna die? Like, I think if I started one of those books, like someone would be dead by the halfway point.
Hers are like meet cute and then he kills her.
Or maybe they can meet cute at a crime scene. They can work that in there. All right. Well, on that fun, light note, I want to thank both of you so much for your time and energy tonight. I know it's a lot to come on here and do these virtual events. Alafair, it was an absolute pleasure. You did a wonderful job. I'm so glad that you could do this evening. And
Thanks,
Mike,
McKenna.
of course, my pleasure having you. Mike, of course, congratulations on the #1 New York Times bestseller yet again. Well deserved. Are you doing many more of these, or are you done?
I'm doing a few things in December, but this is kind of the end of the virtual tour. And
well, I hope you get that nice dinner.
Yeah, I'm glad to end here, and with you two guys are great friends of mine, and thanks for what you're doing, McKenna, and keeping the flame going. And,
thank you.
And as Alafair said earlier, buy books from her.
Well, I really appreciate that. We're hanging in there. We're doing well, and it's so nice to be able to visit with good friends, albeit virtually. So thanks to everyone who's watched. I think you should have already received books, or your books should be coming imminently, but they were all shipped out last week. So thank you for ordering from us. Thank you for participating in this event. And again, if you tuned in late, we'll be sending you an email with a private link to view this on YouTube after the fact. Everyone have a great evening, and thanks again so much. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks, McKenna.